One of the most exciting, skillful and revered talents that ever came through Tottenham's academy is keen to come back to White Hart Lane this summer. And in other news, an ex-Tottenham manager is hitting the headlines yet again, and Liverpool at Anfield, some of their best players rumoured to be heading for the exit and going abroad. I'll keep you up to date with all of that in today's daily transfer news. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Please do give the video a like. Press subscribe if you're not already and you want some daily transfer news and other Premier League news coming into your inbox. But let's get started. Marcus Edwards, Sporting Lisbon's number 10, an absolute genius of a playmaker, came up through the Tottenham Hotspur Academy. Mauricio Pochettino called him Mini Messi. And so many Spurs fans were unbelievably excited about what this player could do. But unfortunately, it never quite worked out at Spurs. And as a result, he went over to Holland first and then got his big move to Sporting Lisbon, where over the last few years, he's been ripping it up. He's such a brilliant young player, incredible kind of low centre of gravity, an ability to go either way, beat a man, and could well be the dribbly winger that Tottenham Hotspur have been crying out for. Not to mention the fact that all the stories coming out in the press today are that Tottenham still have up to a 35% sell-on clause attached to Marcus Edwards. And perhaps that is why the rumours coming out over the last 24 hours are that he is keen to return to Tottenham Hotspur. He knows, or at least his agent knows, that we are looking for that kind of player, and that with that 35% sell-on clause, Daniel Levy will be thinking, it makes more economic sense than not to potentially bring him back, and could he even be the answer to our creative woes in the wide forward positions? Now, I know what you're thinking, Spurs fans. Well, we've just signed Timo Werner on another loan, so how's that going to affect it? Well, I think it's been said amongst all the big journalists this week, Alistair Gold, Charlie Eccleshare, Jack Pitt-Brook, etc., that the fact that we've brought Timo Werner in on another year's loan deal does not mean by any means whatsoever that we are not still looking for a first team player to come in those wide areas, and that's where Marcus Edwards could fit the bill. And the Portuguese press are saying that Edwards wants to return home and rejoin Spurs this summer. Now, it wouldn't be equal of me if I didn't mention the fact that even back in the day when Pochettino was calling him and describing him as the mini Messi, there were some attitude problems from Marcus Edwards, and specifically apparently an inability to kind of turn up on time. And with managers such as Pochettino, and of course after that Jose Mourinho and the likes of Conte, and even now into Big Ange Postecoglou, these kind of managers do not accept that kind of behavioural issue. And it'll be interesting to see if there is indeed any kind of credence to this rumour, whether Ange Postecoglou will get on the phone to Marcus Edwards and really hear from him without doubt that he really wants to come and make Tottenham his home again and become a kind of top-level Premier League player. That is what I think will be the interesting part. I don't think finances will be an issue. Obviously, we've dealt with Sporting Lisbon before, having bought Pedro Porro off them. And do I believe that he's got the talent to become a first-team regular at Spurs? I do. I absolutely do. But it's those kind of behavioural issues and attitude stuff, personality, kind of previous in his personality, which I think could stop the deal. Let me know in the comments, if you're a Spurs fan, whether you would like that to be a deal we should do. In other Spurs news, coming out from Dan Kilpatrick, a brilliant journalist, make sure you follow him if you don't already, that Brian Hill, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg and Giovanni Lo Celso all expected to leave Tottenham this summer. We'll be waiting to see if the bids are correct, but if the bids are acceptable to the club, they will all be allowed to leave. Meanwhile, in terms of players who are literally not in Ange Postecoglou's plans, there's a big list of them. Joe Rodon, Jed Spence, Sergio Reguilon, the forgotten man. He did all right at Brentford actually this season. Tanguy Ndombele, obviously, and Japhet Tanganga, who I think Millwall are still trying to get a deal over the line for. The only one that surprises me a little bit there is Gio Lo Celso, but of course, as I've said numerous times, he just has an inability to stay fit. He'll have a good game, and then he'll get a little niggle and not be able to play. And then kind of to rub salt in the wound, he always makes himself available to play for Argentina, which, you know, that's good. You know, of course it is. But if you then come back from your international duty and you're unable to play regular games for your club, then that makes it very difficult. So, like I've been saying for a while now, if we can get anything around 10, 15, 20 million pounds for the likes of Højbjerg and Lo Celso, snap your hands off. and rebuild in the style that Ange wants, and certainly in terms of players who can get on the pitch a lot. I mentioned at the top that a former Tottenham manager has been hitting the headlines again. I've mentioned him already. Jose Mourinho is set to sign a 2-year deal as manager of Fenerbahce. How the mighty have fallen. Jose is a dinosaur now. Now, I know Jose Mourinho fans love to get involved in the comments on videos. If you're a Jose Mourinho fan, let me know what you think. The reason I say that he's a dinosaur is because it seems to me, as Gen Z players come and kind of take the fore in terms of first teams all around the biggest leagues in the world, managers like Mourinho and Conte and their particular brand of using the stick rather than the carrot to manage, it does not seem to be working. And if you look at how Jose's career has gone, it's gone kind of Chelsea, Inter Milan, and then you're looking at after he went for Spurs, you're looking at his kind of career going downhill really. Roma probably on a level with Spurs, and now into the Turkish league. In fact, I would even say it seems a bit early for Jose to go into the Turkish league. I thought his next management job might be kind of the Portuguese national team. Obviously, there was talk in the last couple of weeks of him being a favourite for the Chelsea manager's job, but it seems like the Chelsea ownership, in their classic kind of very quick up and down U-turny style, have ruled that one out. So he's going to go to Fenerbahce. Of course, Galatasaray have had most of the success recently in Turkey, so maybe Jose looks at the Fenerbahce job as a potential one where he can grab success that hasn't been there recently, and he definitely does manage best with his back to the wall. So let's see what happens with Jose. And also Tottenham, of course, you know, as a Spurs fan, Tottenham have sold a lot of players to Turkey over the last few years. Davinson Sanchez, and then Serge Aurier went there via Nottingham Forest, and of course Tanguy Ndombele on loan. So, you know, maybe Jose will go to Fenerbahce and go back to Spurs to pull out some of his ex-players. I certainly wouldn't be afraid of him going to get Tanguy Ndombele on a free and saying to him, I'll take you down the park, mate, like I did during COVID. I'll take you down the park, get you fit, and you can be our class number 8 or number 10. Onwards with more Spurs news. Christian Romero has given an interview explaining how he feels about how the season went and his thoughts for next season. This interview actually has got a lot of kind of traction, and I'll give you some quotes and then explain why. Christian Romero says, "The truth is that I'm fine. For now, I'm not thinking about a transfer. I'm thinking about preparing myself these days to get to the national team in the best way possible, which is the next step I have." He said, "The things that come up at the moment are obviously always analysed, but I'm not thinking about the future, I'm thinking about the national team. Now that I have the Copa America, I will always try to take the national team to the top, and then we will see what happens. I'm very happy to be in this present, even though group achievements haven't been the best, or we didn't expect to end like this. But also, at the group level, for the coach's first year, by which he means Ange Postecoglou, he has been good in all lines," he said. "We'll have to keep wanting more. Individually, I'm very happy for this beautiful season that I've had." Now, the reason this has got so much traction is because of that first quote. For now, I'm not thinking about a transfer. But for me, very specifically, he was clearly asked by the journalist, and I think it was ESPN South America. He was specifically asked, will you be looking for a transfer because I guess Tottenham didn't make it into the Champions League or win any trophies, etc. So he's only answering the journalist's question. For me, if anybody wanted to get Christian Romero out of Spurs at the moment, he's got a long-term contract, you're looking at upwards of £80 million. He's a World Cup winner. He's a top-notch defender, world-class, clearly world-class defender, but also so brilliant with the ball at his feet, and he's our vice-captain. I just cannot see that happening any time soon. However, what feels good about that, if it were to be the case that Christian Romero wanted to leave any time in the next couple of years, then we've already brought in Radu Dragusin, who for me is an absolute identikit replacement for Christian Romero in any situation where he's suspended or injured or further down the line if he was wanting to be sold, and Dragusin can just learn from Romero at Spurs over the next year or 18 months or so. So nothing worrying me about Christian Romero there, but let me know in the comments your thoughts on it. Did you get a bit more scared by it? Do you think he's angling for a move? Let me know. Tottenham Hotspur youth star Luka Vuskovic. Now, this is the player who we signed about 6 months, a year ago, but we have let stay out on loan for the next couple of years because of his age. Well, this is why. He'll be required to collect more points in order to be allowed to play in England. Therefore, it is expected that the Spurs defender will be loaned out to a club in Holland or Belgium. He's been back, I think, in Serbia for the last 6 months or so, playing really well. I've seen some really good social clips of him. He's a kind of 6'4" beast who loves to play with the ball from centre-back. But clearly he hasn't currently got enough points in which he can get a work permit at Spurs. So we are loaning him out so that he can get these international points. This shows me more that Tottenham are doing their forward thinking far more impressively now than they have done in the past. We're hoovering up young talent like Bergvall, like Vuskovic, and yet if they're not quite ready yet or they can't officially legally play yet, we palm them out for a little while and bring them back when they can. Something, and I hate to say this, but something that Arsenal did incredibly well with William Saliba. When he came back in from his loan deals abroad, he was absolutely ready straight away for first team football and slotted in, and arguably one of the best defenders in Europe at the moment. Some more news. Spurs have been invited by Hearts, that's Heart of Midlothian in Scotland, to a pre-season match at Tynecastle on the 17th of July. That's as part of the Edinburgh Club's 150th anniversary celebration. So you'll be able to watch that one on Spurs Play if you've got that. I don't know if you guys have seen the Overlap, Gary Neville's interview show, but he did a long interview with Wayne Rooney in which Wayne Rooney said former Spurs player and club top scorer and legend Harry Kane to Wayne Rooney is England's greatest ever player. What do you guys think? For me, he'd have to be up there. I mean, but of course, you think about Bobby Charlton, you think about Bobby Moore, because they're the players who kind of led England to glory in 1966. And until Harry Kane lifts a trophy for England, which for me may well be this summer's Euros, but until that day, you can't say he's England's best ever player. But he's the top scorer for England. He never misses a game, and this is stuff that Wayne Rooney was saying. He never misses a game. He never kicks up a fuss. He always works incredibly hard. Unbelievably professional player. So on those levels, yeah, absolutely, he has to be in the conversation for England's best ever player. But until he lifts that trophy, and I'm very hopeful that this will be something that could happen this summer, I don't think you can put him at that top mantle yet. However, if he does win the Euros this summer and does lift it, will he become Sir Harry Kane? And if he does, I'm hopeful that Spurs will bring him back in the next year or two. Hopefully he'll win a few trophies with Vincent Kompany at Bayern Munich, then come back to Spurs to finish his career there. On to some more transfer news across the Premier League now. As I mentioned at the top, Liverpool's Colombia forward Luis Diaz and apparently England defender Joe Gomez, who is in the Euros preliminary squad, they are both targets of Saudi Pro League clubs as they look to attract younger players this summer. I've talked about this a little bit before. Saudi Arabia are keen to kind of lose their reputation as only having old players who are looking for a money deal at the end of their careers. So they're looking for slightly younger players. And Luis Diaz and Joe Gomez are both only 27, so more in their prime. So it'll be interesting to see if anything happens there. Obviously, Arne Slot has come into Liverpool. He will be looking to lay a marker down to impress his players, but I certainly, if I was a player at Liverpool now, and I've mentioned it a little bit before, I would be wondering whether anybody will be able to take on the legacy of what Jurgen Klopp did at the club. It's very difficult to follow a legacy. It's very rarely done, and Klopp was just such a huge figure, not only within the club, but also within the community and the city. And Arne Slot has a lot of work to do, I think, to impress the fans, but also, probably more importantly in the short term, impress the players. On to some Manchester United news. They are apparently, according to Miguel Delaney, considering a move for Chelsea's Trevor Chalobah. Now, Trevor Chalobah is being talked about a lot this summer because obviously he is pure profit for Chelsea, and we know they need to sell before the end of June to cover their profit and sustainability rules. And he will come relatively cheap because I think he's only got a year left on his contract. And Man United have been talked about as being a club who also need to do things relatively cheaply this summer because they've spent so much money previously and have such a high wage bill. So Trevor Chalobah, who has been on the list of Spurs as well, he now is apparently interesting Manchester United. I wonder if that's got anything to do with the fact that Man United are still doing this kind of report on whether they think Erik ten Hag is the correct manager to stay, and if not, whether they will get Maurizio Pochettino in. And maybe Pochettino in some early talks has said, I'd quite like us to get Trevor Chalobah and maybe even Conor Gallagher. Jean-Claire Todibo, obviously he plays for Nice in France, who are also owned by Ineos, and he's been asked about whether he would be interested in being bought by his own club's owners to go over to Old Trafford because United are apparently keen on taking him. He says, in terms of Ineos, he says they changed a lot of things. They gave us a comfort, so there was a mood around the team to allow the team to succeed. They put a lot of importance on being around the players to give them the opportunity to have the best performance they can. So clearly Todibo talking up the impact that Ineos had at the club he's at in France, maybe with mind to hopefully getting bought by the same owners to go and play at Old Trafford. Todibo is a player who was interesting Tottenham Hotspur last summer, and a lot of fans were very angry that we didn't get Todibo over the line and went for Mickey van der Ven instead. I think it's fair to say none of those fans are angry anymore because Mickey van der Ven did such an incredible job in his first season in the Premier League. What a talent he is. Be interesting to see whether Todibo makes that move to Old Trafford. Man United are also apparently interested in another French centre-back. That's Lenny Yoro from Lille. Meanwhile, over to the south side of London at Arsenal, they are, according to John Cross in the Mirror, closing in on a £45 million deal for Benjamin Sesko. The striker is keen to move to the Emirates, and now Arsenal have to kind of thrash out the deal with his club. Over to the west side of London, Chelsea are looking to sign a new striker this summer as part of their next season plans, but despite what I've been saying all week and all the rumours that have been coming out over the last few weeks, Chelsea, according to Fabrizio Romano, are no longer looking at Victor Osimhen from Napoli. They're saying that, or at least Fabrizio Romano is saying that with or without Lukaku, that deal will not go through as it's planned. It is still, however, planned that Lukaku and Broja will leave the club. And talking of Armando Broja, AS Monaco are keen to get him over to France to replace Ben Yedder. This is what the BBC are saying. It says that Monaco's priority is a young striker, and Broja will leave Chelsea on a permanent deal this summer. Apparently Monaco considering a number of number 9 potentials for this coming summer. Fabrizio Romano also says that Crystal Palace, who keep an eye on Crystal Palace, under Oliver Glasner, as we know, did an incredible job in the back end of the season, but now also really looking to push the boat out in terms of transfer dealings, which makes me wonder, are they expecting to lose Eberechi Eze and Michael Olise, and are they trying to get their ducks in a row before those transfers get done? Similar to when Gareth Bale left Tottenham Hotspur and we did all our dealings of the kind of 7 or 8 replacements before his deal was announced. It seems to me like maybe Crystal Palace are trying to get their deals done before they let Eze and Olise leave. So the latest rumour with Palace is that Jude Bellingham's brother, may be coming to them from Sunderland. Oliver Glasner wants him apparently. Dougie Freedman, their sporting director, who just turned down the job of sporting director at Newcastle. They are working to convince Jude Bellingham that Crystal Palace is the place to go for them. Apparently, Thomas Frank at Brentford is also interested in Jobe. Let's go over to East London with West Ham, and they're in talks with Brazilian talent Luis Guilherme from Palmeiras. They are really looking at the Brazilian market this summer, West Ham. And their move for the centre-back, Bruno, has just hit the buffers a little bit in the last couple of days. From everything I've heard, Bruno has suddenly asked for more money right at the back end of that transfer. So that's stalled, but they're going for a 30 million fee plus a sell-on clause for Luis Guilherme. I haven't seen much of the player, but from everything that the West Ham fans are saying, they're very excited about that. A huge name in world football could be available this summer for just 15 million euros due to a release clause, and that is Antoine Griezmann. Several European and American teams have positioned themselves to potentially pay that release clause and get him out of Spain to come and play for them. Be interesting to see if Griezmann went anywhere else. I would love to see him in the Premier League. What a talent he's been, but it seems like maybe his time has been and gone in terms of playing Premier League football. Into managerial news now. According to Rob Dawson at ESPN, Pep Guardiola is unlikely to take another job in club management once he leaves Manchester City. All the talk is that he will leave Manchester City at the back end of next season. Funnily enough, just in time for the independent inquiry over Manchester City's 115 charges to be heard, and then maybe Pep Guardiola will be interested in going into international management. Now, of course, the natural fit would be for him to manage Spain. However, is there a story for Pep in that he could take over England if they've never won anything, assuming they don't win the Euros this summer, although I do think they've got a great chance. Let's say they haven't won anything, and then Pep Guardiola takes the job as England manager. That would be something that it would certainly answer all the critics of Gareth Southgate who claim that the reason we don't win anything is because we don't play good enough tiki-taka football. Pep Guardiola would get them playing that, but would he have enough time with them on the training ground to really make it work? Would be interesting to see. Meanwhile, other managerial news, Mikel Arteta is apparently about to sign a really long-term deal at Arsenal to become one of the highest paid managers in the world, apparently worth more than £10 million a year. I personally still think, and I could be wrong, but I personally think that Arteta is the reason that Arsenal are not winning the Premier League rather than the reason that they are potentially getting close to it, because I just think he makes strange decisions at the wrong time. But He's certainly got them in a much better position than they were in before. I don't know whether that's worth £10 million a year or not, but it will remain to be seen. Meanwhile, Kieran McKenna has signed that long-term deal at Ipswich. He said, "I'm so happy to have committed my future to taking the next step with Ipswich Town, and I'm really excited for what's ahead as we continue this journey together." I really wonder if Bayern Munich's move for Vincent Kompany has made him think, oh, actually, I don't need to leave for Chelsea or Man United straight away, because even if I get Ipswich relegated, as long as I play with the same similar forward-thinking progressive style, I could still get a big move like Vincent Kompany did. I'd say the only difference is that Vincent Kompany had a background and a former stature as a big player and a big personality to back him up. So I think that's why Bayern were still willing to go for him, as well as because Pep Guardiola put a good word in for Vincent Kompany to Bayern Munich, apparently. So it'd be interesting to see how Kieran McKenna's Ipswich do this year, but to all intents and purposes looks like a very good coach. Kevin De Bruyne has been voted as the Premier League's greatest ever midfielder. This is in Sky Bet's fan view. This kind of surprises me. Not Ryan Giggs, not Frank Lampard, not Paul Scholes or Steven Gerrard, but Kevin De Bruyne. I don't know, maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned, but I'd say with Ryan Giggs' stats and numbers and the longevity of his career, I'd probably say he has to be up there as the best midfielder in Premier League history. I know he's had some personal problems, doesn't seem like that great a bloke over the last few years, but in terms of his performances on the pitch, you'd have to go with Ryan Giggs. Maybe some of you would say Ryan Giggs wasn't a midfielder, he was a forward, but actually I think you'll find he played most of his career at left midfield as a winger, having to get up and down that line for Sir Alex Ferguson. Let me know in the comments who you think the best midfielder in Premier League history has been. Red Bull, I'm sure you've heard this, but if you haven't, Red Bull have bought a minority stake in Leeds United. They're not going to have their name on the club or the ground like they do with Red Bull Leipzig or Red Bull Salzburg, but they are going to have the sponsorship on Leeds United's shirts for the next few years. Be interesting to see what happens with them. And finally, Angel Di Maria, what a player he was, ex-Man United, of course, but really talented Argentinian genius. He's agreed to move to Inter Miami to play alongside Lionel Messi. That is according to ESPN Argentina. And then this morning, I saw that the latest player to move to Inter Miami is also Matt Ritchie from Newcastle, ex-Bournemouth player. I saw that very briefly just before I came on, so I'm not sure exactly if that's totally gone through, or maybe he was just holding a scarf up in the crowd, but that's an interesting one. On one side you've got Angel Di Maria, and on the other you've got Matt Ritchie. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Do press the video, do drop a like to the video and press subscribe if you haven't already for daily transfer content, where I will always lead with Spurs because they're the team I support. Also, if you want to become a member and help support me make this daily content, all the details in the description box. You can become a pro YouTube member or a Patreon member, only £1 a month. And this is also available as a podcast. If you want to go over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, just type in the Spurred On podcast and you can get it in your ears daily, every day. Have a great weekend, guys. I'll see you next week. Cheers.